Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or dsw.com today and let us surprise you.
Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised.
My name is Sarah Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. Today, I'm bringing you something very special. As you know, I covered the infamous case of the Sodder children a few years back, and I was actually able to connect with the great-great-granddaughter of George and Jennie Sodder. Her name is Miranda Weeks. She's now investigating the case for herself, and was kind enough to join me for an interview that I'm going to play for you today. You'll hear about her investigation, including a brand new development that she's never shared anywhere else. We discuss the case, her theories, being a family member in true crime, and of course, how you can help. Now, before I play the interview, I do want to draw your attention to this episode's description. There you'll find a link to Miranda's Facebook group, a petition to create a flower garden for the Sodder children, and her email. She's asking for anyone with tips, pictures of the billboard featuring the Sodder children, or anyone who may have questions to email her. But without further introduction, here is my interview with Miranda Weeks.
My name's Miranda Weeks, and I am the great-great-granddaughter of George and Jennie Sodder. Their son, Joe, was my great-grandfather, and he was the one that was in the Army at the time and was the only one that was not there that night.
I mean, obviously, it's been a very long time, and I would love to know, and I'm sure so many people would love to know, what motivated you to personally become involved in the investigation?
I've wanted to look into this since I learned about it as a kid. I actually remember telling one of my best friends when I was around 8 that I was going to grow up and that I was going to solve it. I used to spend a lot of time with her grandparents, and one day I was telling her grandfather, who was basically like my grandfather, the story because, as a kid, I didn't realize how widely known the story was. I thought it was just, a family thing. And once I finished telling him the story, my friend said, yeah, and Miranda is going to grow up and she's going to solve it. And her grandfather looked at me and he laughed and he said, kid, they've been trying to figure that out for decades. They're probably never going to find those kids. And that was the moment I decided I was going to prove him wrong. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I know he would be proud of me if he was. But really, I've always wanted to look into this case. I just never knew where to start. And then a year ago, I decided to reach out to Sylvia's daughter, whose name is also Jennie, because I had a question about something that I had read. And she ended up offering to send me all the documents that she had that I didn't even know existed. And originally, when I decided to look into it, my goal was to try to find the kids because I figured, technology is so much more advanced than it was now, and it might be a little easier to track them down. But once I read through all the documents she sent me, I realized that what I had grown up reading about it was only a fraction of what had actually happened. And that's when my goal changed, and I decided that I needed to try to correct the narrative as much as I possibly could. And I learned that it was George and Jenny's wish that this story be told long after they passed, and I just want to make sure it's told correctly.
Yeah, I love that. I think that you take so much care with this case. I mean, it's your family. And I'm sure everybody wants to know, what the most significant leads or discoveries are that you've made so far.
Okay, so there's 3 that I want to mention. There's 2 that I have talked about elsewhere, but there's one that I have not talked about anywhere else. It'll be the first time I'm talking about it today. So, firstly, I was able to determine that the fire marshal was not actually there on Christmas Day, even though he said in his 1950 fire marshal report that he was. I was not able to find a single newspaper that stated he was there that day, but I was able to find 3 different newspapers, 2 that were published on December 26th and 1 on December 27th, that all stated that nobody could reach a member of the fire marshal's office. He actually did not show up until December 27th when he attended one of the coroner's inquests, but I don't know where that inquest was held, so I don't know if he actually went to the property at all until that year, like soon after the fire happened. And then this is something I was necessarily discovered by me, but it is something that I didn't personally know until I started my research, which is that it wasn't the insurance man that made the threat, but it was actually George's former employer, who was a man named Ferenzo Giannullo. He's the one that sent the insurance salesman, who was also his friend, to try to get George to not only raise the house insurance, but also to get life insurance on his whole family. George refused, and then Ferenzo showed up and made the threat. And the full threat was, I see you have refused to take out insurance and refused to sign the papers to settle Mrs. Sodder's father's estate. Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed, and you are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini. Prior to my research, I had only heard the second half of the threat. I had never heard the first line. And Ferenzo was also the beneficiary of the house insurance, and he had it raised just 2 weeks before the fire without telling George, and he was paid out after the fire. Before I get to the third one, do you have any questions about that?
No, I think I'm just sitting here kind of like, wow. It surprising, but not surprising, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's so much to this case that you read it and you just roll your eyes, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, obviously, I think the work that you've done is incredible, and I am just honored to be able to listen to what you've done.
Oh, I'm honored that you're letting me speak about it, honestly. And what I want to talk about next, I'm really excited to talk to you about. So I was able to find out that this may or may not be related to the kid's disappearance, but I think either way, it's still worth talking about. And it's that Jenny's younger sister, Alma Cipriani, died in a car accident on December 21st, 1948 in Cortez, Florida. But once I did some digging, it doesn't really seem like an accident at all. I'm not going to mention any names besides Alma's, since this was officially ruled an accident, but I still think what happened to her deserves to be talked about. Whether it's related or not, it's still another tragedy that Jenny had to endure around Christmas. And just for transparency, this all comes from newspapers published during that time because no official documents on the accident still exist. So Alma was 32 at the time of her death, and she had been in Cortez for about 2 months prior to her death, but it's unknown whether she planned on living there permanently or if she was just getting a house down there to visit in the winter. So around 10:45 p.m. on December 21st, 1948, the car she was riding in went speeding across the Cortez drawbridge until it went through the open draw and the car sank 18 feet in the water. So this drawbridge was a turnstile one, which means the bridge tender would have to walk to the middle and turn a wheel to make the road parallel with itself, and then turn the wheel again once the boat or the barge passed through. According to the bridge tender, the car was coming awfully fast towards him, and he knew it wouldn't stop in time. The car went off the edge and traveled about 60 feet in the air before hitting the other side and sinking. The driver, who was a local man from Bradenton, which is the island across from Cortez, was able to jump out of the car before it hit the water, but Alma was not. He only suffered lacerations to his right hand and face. A local 18-year-old was able to jump down and retrieve Alma's body from the car. He was finally successful on his second attempt, and he told a local paper that the car had been flipped upside down and that her body was floating freely inside the car. He would tell a local paper that he believed if the car had been raised before the recovery, it might have been difficult to find the body. He pulled her out through the opening on the driver's side and brought her to the surface, where she was unable to be revived. What exactly he meant by opening in the driver's side isn't clear, but if the driver had jumped out, then it would stand to reason that he had to open the door to do it. And she was in the water for no more than an hour before her body was discovered. And according to an article published on December 22nd, her body was supposed to be kept at a local funeral home until a coroner's inquest could complete an investigation. But according to her death certificate, her body was sent back to West Virginia on December 23rd, just one day after she had passed away. And according to a paper published on December 23rd, the inquest had been deferred pending further investigation, but a date for resumption had not been set. The coroner's jury, which consisted of 6 unnamed men, finally met on January 5th of 1949, and they cleared the driver of any wrongdoing. 8 witnesses were called to testify, but the driver was not called, nor was he even present at this inquest. They decided that the crash was caused by the warning system being inadequate. The warning system consisted of a chain with a lantern on it placed 20 feet from the edge of the draw opening. It apparently only took the jury a few minutes to make this decision. They claimed it was hard to see the warning system because it was dim and because a rise in the bridge obscured it until you could get close to it. However, they did not mention in the inquest that there were also warning lights on the upper structure of the draw, which were high enough up that you would have been able to see them regardless of the rise in the bridge. The coroner's jury did not make any suggestions on how to fix the warning system, and in fact, the warning system wouldn't be updated for another 5 years. And also during the coroner's inquest, a man stated that he had heard Alma scream before the car went off the draw. However, he was on the opposite side of the bridge behind 2 other cars when it happened, and this man also just so happened to be the circuit court clerk. The bridge tender, who was much closer to the car than the clerk, did not report hearing any screams. And I dug through newspapers and searched Cortez Bridge car accident from 1922 when the bridge was built until 1953 when the warning system was installed. And this accident was the only one in 30 years where a car went through the open draw. The only other car accident on the bridge where a car went into the water was in the 1930s when a couple hydroplaned and went through the side railing. And their car had been completely submerged for 45 minutes, but they were still in their seats when divers went down there to get them. And reminder that I just said that Alma's body was floating within the car whenever they went to go get her.
This episode of Voices for Justice is brought to you by Quince. I've been trying to be more intentional about what I wear each day. I'm leaning into pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and still put together. And Quince has been my go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are flattering, and everything just works without overthinking it. They use premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and ultra-soft denim. And the best part? Everything is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality and craftsmanship, not brand markup. I recently just ordered their tiered linen dress, of course in black. I wanted to pair it with one of my favorite pairs of brown wedges. The problem was, I didn't have a brown purse. So I got that from Quince too. It's one of my favorite outfits. It's easy, effortless, and feels amazing, especially as we're getting a little bit warmer here in Phoenix. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/justice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/justice for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/justice. This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Chewy. If you have pets, you probably know about Chewy, and you also know that when they say that they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, they're not messing around. To keep them happy, Chewy has over 100,000 products from all the brands my pets love at prices I love. To keep them healthy, Chewy offers pet prescriptions, pet insurance, telehealth vet visits, and they're even rolling out vet clinics across the country. I've been shopping with them for a very long time. And in addition to the auto-ship feature that gets the dog's food to them every single month, I also love to experiment with different treats. But I'm a bit picky. For me, it has to be high quality with simple ingredients. I recently picked up treats from Shepherd Boy Farms that are 100% just chicken breast. Popcorn and Heber are already obsessed. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. That's chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. I mean, obviously, that's extremely interesting and, of course, unfortunate. But I would love to know, what do you think all of that means? Why do you think it would happen that way? Obviously, it seems extremely suspicious to me.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, if it's connected to the kid's disappearance, then maybe she found something out that she shouldn't, and whoever was involved decided that she needed to be gotten rid of. If it wasn't connected, I really couldn't tell you. But either way, it seems incredibly suspicious. Once you look at everything, it does not seem like it was an accident.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. And what are the odds that so many of these incidents are happening to the same group of people? It seems astronomical.
Around Christmas.
Yeah. What is it about Christmas?
I know. I don't know. And it's only 3 years. It would have been, that Christmas would have been the 3-year anniversary of when the fire happened.
It sounds like someone might be trying to send a message, right?
Yes, I do believe that as well. Yes, and I will say that I was told that Jennie Sodder did also find it incredibly suspicious. She may not have had all the facts that I do, but either way, she thought it was a suspicious accident.
Yeah. That's crazy. I'll have to look. Obviously, I think that you've done incredible research. My first thought is I need to look into that. But I have no doubt that you found everything out there because you're just incredible.
Yeah, and I can send you all the newspaper clippings I found. And like I said, unfortunately, there's no that I've been able to find so far. There's no official documents on the accident because it was ruled an accident. So if they did write anything down as far as the coroner's inquest, then it doesn't exist. But I've learned that it's fairly common for older cases such as this, if they're closed, for them to not keep anything on it. So the West Virginia State Police, whenever they gave all the documents to Sylvia, it was because they were purging old closed cases that they didn't, feel like they needed anymore. So I unfortunately run across that a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those paper documents especially. They get lost. There's floods, there's fires, there's, corruption. it's so tough.
Yeah, and like it's rough because we'll probably never know what actually happened, like why they decided to target her. Whether she was actually alive when the car went into the water. There's so many unknowns here, but like I said, regardless, something obviously happened to her, and it's never been talked about before, and I feel like she deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, no, I love that. Her story deserves to be told, and I think it's really important to ask these questions and dig as deep as you can.
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to ask you also, of course, with this case, I keep calling it like larger than life. It truly feels that way. I feel like it's, not only one of the oldest, but one of the most infamous cases in true crime. So I want to ask if you feel like there, are certain aspects that have been misunderstood, overlooked, or just like misrepresented in general.
I feel like the efforts that George and Jenny went through to find their kids aren't talked about enough. Everybody knows about the billboards because it was up for decades. But one thing I was able to find that I had never known is that the very first billboard was published in at least 88 different newspapers across 32 states, with 3 additional newspapers in Canada. And this would have been in 1953. And that's just the ones that are available online. So I'm sure that the number of papers is really much higher than that. They did not let the fact that the local officials refused to help them stop them from trying to find their kids. And they were basically gaslit for the rest of their lives, and they still never gave up, and they still always had hope that they would see their kids one day. I also think that people need to understand that this wasn't a typical kidnapping. I think when most people hear that word, they automatically think that the kids were taken by force, which would be really hard to do with 5 kids. So I can understand when you think of it that way, how it can seem impossible. But I think in reality, they more than likely knew whoever took them and went with them willingly. Either they were told ahead of time that they would be picked up that night, or when they went out to go do their chores, they were convinced to go with this person. I think in either scenario, they were probably promised some sort of Christmas surprise. And, what kid doesn't love a surprise, especially around Christmas? And also, I think people need to understand that while there was technically an official investigation done, it was not done very well. Other than the Department of Public Safety report taken on Christmas Day, there aren't any official documents until the 1950 fire marshal report, and that was really only done because of the pressure that George and Jenny and their hired detectives were putting on the local officials. And since we know that the fire marshal wasn't there that day, that makes any reports from them far less credible than they were if he had been there that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most powerful parts of this entire story, this case, is how much their parents did work for them. And I mean, to your point, we know that most child abductions happen, at the hands, I should say, of somebody who knows the children. So all of that lines up for me. And of course, all these officials and their, wackadoodle stories about what happened on the day. I mean, that all makes perfect sense to me.
Wackadoodle is one word for it, that's for sure.
I'm trying to be kind, right? I'm like, wacky.
No, I get it. There's so many times that I've read something in the official report and I just have to close my laptop and breathe for a little bit and go do something else because it just will make my blood boil.
Yeah, well, and it seems like after all this time, what is there to lose with just, getting the official story out there, maybe clearing a few things up? Like, I feel like it would be a win for any department. Like, nobody's going to come back from Mussolini days and start, enacting revenge. At least I don't think so.
No, and exactly. And I don't feel like what happened back then should not reflect on what's happening now. Like obviously we're living in two completely different times. Like it was so much easier. I'm not saying that it like there aren't corrupt, departments now. There obviously are, but like back then it was so much easier to get away with stuff because you didn't have a digital footprint. Like everything that I have was typewritten, and once you typed it out and you sent it, that was it. Unless you made a copy yourself, you had to trust whoever you sent it to send it back to you. And that's so many of the reports, whenever they would send it to somebody, they'd be like, when you're done with this, please send it back to us so we can have it for our records. Okay, well, what if that person didn't send it back? What was the plan,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Absolutely. I feel like there's just an endless amount of rabbit holes in this case, unfortunately. You poor thing. I can't even imagine what it's like sorting through everything and knowing that there's still so much missing.
So many rabbit holes, so many. I think I've learned to figure out which ones are worth digging into now and which ones are worth just like holding off on because it's I can tell myself that I'm going to sit down and then I'm going to research for like an hour, and the next thing I know, it's 5 hours later and I am like so far from where I originally wanted to research. So, yeah, there's definitely so many rabbit holes to go down, but it I could probably make a whole book on the rabbit holes that I could go down.
I mean, I would read that book. I would read that book. Gosh, I think it's definitely one of the most complex cases, when it comes to forensics, when it comes to the theories, it's just endless, absolutely endless.
Yes, and there's so and there's I have a lot of official documents, but like I've said, there's so many missing. Like they'll reference like writing somebody and receiving a reply, but they don't include the reply in the file. Or I have letters that say, "Oh, a meeting happened and there was a court reporter there that wrote everything down," but I don't have any like evidence of them writing anything down. I mean, and it's entirely possible that they didn't write anything down. I have one letter where they tried to say that what exactly happened in this meeting couldn't be written down. Okay, why? Why could you not write it down? That doesn't make any sense. It's more like you just didn't want to write it down because you don't want to be held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bad excuse in my book. Um, yeah, gosh. And again, I think, the detriment is having to deal with paper records so much in this case. Like, and just, so many different, styles of record keeping, which back in the day could be, writing notes on the front of a paper file or, a Post-it or whatever. Like there was like no rhyme or reason, no organization. And of course, no digitizing anything.
Yeah, and I actually last time I was in town, I ended up spending more than 4 hours at the courthouse going through all the law books and stuff that they have because I'm trying to like chase down a lead. Um, but and these are all super old, super thick, dusty books, and I probably pulled like 20 of them off the shelves, and I just went through and like pulled a book, took a picture, pulled a book, took a picture, just like rapid fire. And I haven't had a chance to go through everything I found yet. But, since I don't live there anymore, whenever I go, I have to, take the opportunity to get as much information as I can, since a lot of this is not online. And the courthouse does have stuff. They have some things from that time period, but most of it was sent to the archives, and none of that is digitized either. And you can't email them a request for it. You have to write them a letter, and then you have to mail that letter. So the the process for this stuff is not as easy as it would be if it was a modern case.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And you've done so much, traveling, digging through these records, and I have to ask, like, is there anyone else that you've consulted with, like PIs, researchers, anything like that? And if you have they helped?
No, not at the moment. Just because I'm kind of limited and what I can do financially. But if anybody hears this and wants to help me out for free, you're more than you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I not official researchers, but I have made some friends with people that also do like podcasts and stuff. So they do know how to research, and they research similarly to how I do. And they've been helpful in talking things out, being able to talk things out with them, and be able to, one of my friends actually, she's the first person that I told about Alma's accident. And because before that, I was like, I'm reading through it and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this publicly and people are gonna think I'm crazy. So I was able to run it by her first, and she was like, "Oh no, that makes perfect sense." So being able to speak about this with people outside of it has been really helpful for me.
Oh, good. I love that. I know that the true crime community, if you will, can be a double-edged sword. So I'm really glad that you've had that support. And I feel like when you're a family member in a case like this, sometimes, at least in my experience, sometimes I feel like I can be crazy. And I'm like, do you see what I see? Or like, am I just like overthinking this because I'm so close to it?
No, yes, and that is exactly me. And my my boyfriend does hear everything that I find, but he isn't as familiar with true crime as I am. So like he doesn't have that mindset. He just kind of listens and lets me talk it through. So while it is helpful to talk to him, it's especially helpful to talk to people that are familiar with true crime and are able to come into it with that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and bless his heart for listening to everything. I love a supportive partner. I love that you have that.
Oh yeah, bless his heart for sure, because I can go on a ramble sometimes with
As you
and
should. As you
as he
should.
should. And, sometimes I get a little heated and he'll have to be like, "Breathe, calm down." I'm like, "I know, I know, I know."
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it really does help because I think, like I was saying, like you can just like hype yourself up almost. And for me, I always felt like that meme of like the guy in front of the board with the strings, like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And it's like, so
Yeah,
it's nice when people are
exactly.
like, yes, you're not insane.
Exactly, for sure.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
So good, so good, so good. Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now, and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Well, and of course, we have to slide into theories and asking about, and I think for me, it feels, pretty apparent, what happened there. But this case, I think, has really divided people on the internet. So I want people to hear directly from you. You're a family member. You have researched this case probably more than anybody else on this planet at this point. So I just want to hit like the heavy hitters. Do you think that there are any, social or political things that may have been involved in this case?
I'm not too certain on the political climate aspect of it, but socially, I think that the social climate in the town at the time was definitely stacked against them. His former employer and his family were very important people back then, and they owned a lot of the buildings in Fayetteville at the time as well. And in 1951, George and Jennie had stated in a letter to the superintendent of the Department of Public Safety and said that we could not hire a lawyer in Fayetteville because all of them were afraid they would be put out of their office buildings if they took over our case. And not to mention that 5 of the 6 members of the coroner's jury had personal connections to Forenzo, and his first cousin was the foreman of the jury. And they had connections going back to the 30s with several members of those involved with the investigation, including the prosecuting attorney and the fire chief. And they were in a lot of like town clubs, like Rotary Club, and they were Freemasons as well. And they knew at least 2 men that worked at different newspapers in 1945. I've probably gone through at least 1,000 newspapers at this point, and I'm not even done.
Holy cow. There's something about these cases that become generational. Well, I think this case by nature, unfortunately, is generational, right? But what I mean is, these cases I so often see just get passed down generation after generation after generation. And it just, I just wish you could have all the answers.
Oh, me too. But, I've had to accept that I'm not going to get all the answers. I could probably also write a book on the questions that I'll never have answers to, unfortunately, just because of how old this case is, and everybody that was involved has passed away at this point. And like I keep saying, there's so many documents missing. But I just gotta take what I can get, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everybody wants to know, is there like a consensus within the family about what happened? Like, accident, arson, and is there a theory that you subscribe to?
Oh, 100% arson. There's so much that points to arson, and nothing that points to it being an accident. Besides the fact that Forenzo Giudicello had threatened to burn the house down and then raise the insurance without telling George, you also have the fact that the telephone wire was cut 14 feet in the air and 2 feet away from the pole. The ladder that was usually kept next to the house was found 70 feet away from the house over an embankment. Shortly before the fire, a man had showed up and pointed to the brand new fuse boxes and said they were going to start a fire someday. And a passenger on a bus saw balls of fire being thrown onto the roof as the bus passed the house. And how anyone can look at these facts and still think it could have been an accident is a little wild to me. I mean, and all of these things were mentioned in the fire marshal reports as well. Different officials also repeatedly admit that the cause of the fire was undetermined, and they only stated it was due to faulty wiring because the fire was spotted in the room with the telephone. And they try to claim that there was accelerants in the basement. Like, they try to claim that he kept stockpiles of coal, that he had tires down there, that he had gas down there. But George insisted that none of that was true. And I mean, even if it was, it still wouldn't have made the fire hot enough to burn all 5 of the kids' bodies. My personal theory is that the plan was to take the children and burn the house down, since Judula said in his threat, your house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed, and since he raised the house insurance 2 weeks before the fire without telling George. I think whoever took the children off the property that night was known and was trusted by them. And I've found that Jennie Sodder believed the same way based on interviews that she did. She even told a newspaper that she believed the kidnappers must have been familiar to the children, because if it was a stranger, the children would have screamed, and nobody heard any screams that night. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I personally believe that they were told to stay up late that night because the person had some sort of surprise for them. I think that they were then taken to a house in Smithers and told that their family had burned up in the fire and that their older brother had died in the war and that they were essentially orphans. What happened to them after that? I think there are 2 possibilities. Either they were killed shortly after being spotted at the Charleston Hotel, or they were sent to Florida and then shipped out of the country. Unfortunately, I don't believe Maurice survived. Maurice was the oldest boy. He was 14. Survived either way, since he was not spotted at the hotel with the rest of the kids. If they were shipped out of the country, like I said, I don't think they were kept together, and I don't think that they were sent to the country to, be adopted out. I think that Betty could have been, since she was 5, and it would have been a little easier to um, put her into a new family. But as for the rest of them, I don't. I think they could have been sold into slavery or something like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, that could make total sense to me, absolutely. As horrifying as it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's as much as I hate to say it, it's almost better to believe that they were killed shortly after versus what could have happened to them if they weren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, if the motive is revenge, right, why keep the kids alive? I don't often tell people what my personal theories are in cases, but I'm right there with you. And I've had this debate with like other podcasters, right? Is it an accident or is it arson? And I'm like, how can you not see that it's arson? I feel like, if this were to happen in modern day, it would be just so clear. And there would be no argument.
At the bare minimum, it's arson and murder, right? Like, if you assume that the kids did die in the fire, they didn't. I'm going to say that right now. But if you assume they did, then at the very least, it's arson and murder. How you can point this to be an accident, I don't know. But to your point about it happening in modern times, we've kind of discussed this. I can't remember her last name, but Chloe, and then her brother's name was Gage Daniel. They at first didn't think that was arson. They thought that it was an accident and that, the kids had burned up, even though they found the remains of the family's bird.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I mean, just if you think about like the true crime brain, if you will, especially in today's society, like there were threats made, there are witnesses who say that, somebody was throwing fire onto the roof and then this happens. I don't understand how a certain sect of the true crime audience doesn't see that as suspicious and just sees it as an accident. And I have to wonder if it's almost placing blame on the parents. I feel like that's the most common argument I see is they just couldn't accept that their kids died in a fire. And it's like, how are we forgetting about all the other evidence that's stacked up against them? I think any reasonable parent would do exactly what they did.
Oh, exactly. And every retelling doesn't always have all the facts in it, but at least everyone I've seen has stated that there was a threat to burn the house down. And most of them mentioned the ladder missing. Uh and the telephone wire being cut. So I just don't understand, like, if the threat hadn't been made, but the other things that happened, okay, maybe you could explain them away, maybe. But I just don't understand how people can ignore the threat and think that it has nothing to do with it. That's what doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you take all the other stuff and you're like, okay, maybe one of the family members had moved the ladder and didn't tell anybody, or maybe the telephone wire was burned and it just looked like it was cut, but they couldn't tell. But the threat is really what points to me that that it couldn't have been an accident. Like I said, I just don't understand how people can ignore that.
I might have a hot take here that might get me in trouble, but I feel like there's a certain audience in true crime that always views families, affected by violent crime as too emotional to the point where they can't think logically. And I think that happens often in this case. Again, it goes back to like the parents are just grieving and they're not being reasonable, which I think that argument doesn't hold, because they did this for decades. They were fighting for these kids for decades. You
For the
can't
rest of
tell
their
me.
life.
Yeah, exactly, until they died, right? Like, I could see if it was all emotion and no logic, maybe that going on for a few years, but until they die, like, at what point would you expect logic to take over that emotion? You can't assume that people are having that level of emotion for that long. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And the same people that like to ignore the threat being made also like to bring up that in the Department of Safety report, they say that John Sodder, the oldest, told them that he had went in and shaken the kids awake. And I I don't know for sure. He could have said it, or they could have misrepresented what he said, because we don't know what was happening in the situation. We don't know if they just said, "Hey, tell us what happened," and this is what he said, or if they asked him questions like, "Well, why didn't you go wake him up? Why did you just run down the stairs?" But we also got to realize that John had just returned from fighting in World War II 9 days before. Like, he literally just got out of fighting in a brutal war. And I can't even imagine what was going through his head in that moment. And I can imagine him saying that, but just because you know, all these thoughts are running through his head, like, my siblings are dead. Why did I not help them? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not placing blame on him at all. But I'm saying that, we never know how we're going to react in a situation. And he later on says that he didn't say that and that they actually just called to the kids. They didn't go shake them awake. But, so many people like to point to that and they're like, well, why did he say that? But they don't think about what he was going through in that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think that people always have assumptions about what they might do or, what they think others should do. But once you're in that moment and once it's happening, I think that like there's no telling.
Yeah, and I I see so many people that are like well, why did Jenny yell upstairs to her kids? Why didn't she go up there and get her kids? I would have gone up there and gotten my kids. And I'm like, for one, do you not think that she thought about that for the rest of her life? I mean, it wouldn't have mattered if she went up there anyways, because they weren't up there. But do you not think that she thought about that for the rest of her life? And, in the moment when she's, woke up and saw the fire, they weren't thinking, you know, anything else. They weren't thinking their kids were gone. They weren't even thinking that it was a huge fire. They just thought that they were going to be able to put it out quickly and then go back to bed. They never imagined that their entire house was about to burn down. And, I'm sure after that, they constantly thought about how they could have done things differently that night. But like that's not helpful. And placing blame on them is not helpful either. Like, whether she went up there or not does not change the fact that the kids were not up there and that they were taken. If she had gone up there, I mean, it would have she would have been able to be like, oh, well, they weren't up there, but I'm sure officials would have just, dismissed her anyways and been like, well, you just didn't see them or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point. And especially, when you look at the year that this happened, right, it would certainly be common, I think, for any law enforcement official or, fire marshal, whatever, to be like, she's the mother, she's hysterical, and just call it a day.
Well, and, even though the fire marshal wasn't there that day, that he said that in his 1950 report, he said that he showed up that day and that he did not talk to George and Jenny because they were inconsolable and weren't worth talking to. That's basically what he said.
Yeah, it's just insane. Who wouldn't be inconsolable? Who wouldn't be hysterical after losing so many children?
Yeah, so many children, your entire house, everything that belonged to those children, like they literally had to start over completely, like that their whole house burned down. And while they did find some things in the ashes, like they didn't find anything that, I mean, pictures weren't as common back then, but any pictures they had taken of the kids when they were little, anything like that was completely gone. And, back then, once something was gone, it's gone. There was no digital backup. There was nowhere else to go to get those pictures. So, they did have a lot to deal with in the moment. So, of course, like you said, why would you not be inconsolable? I'm sure I would have been too.
What they did to your family, you're lucky to make it out alive.
Streaming on Peacock.
These men are going to come after me. Taking them out is my only chance.
Put a bullet in her head.
From the co-creator of Ozark.
Looks like a family was running drugs.
Execution-style killing, it's rare for the Keys. Any leads on who they might have been running for?
The cartel killed my family. I'm gonna kill them. All of them.
MIA. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
Send Help is now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
We're somewhere in the Gulf of Thailand.
Getting us out of here should be your focus. I'm your boss. You work for me.
We're not in the office anymore.
It's bold, relentless, and endlessly rewatchable. Discover why critics give it 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
You're so fired.
Oh, am I? No help is coming.
Send Help, rated R, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
I feel like you've answered so many of the questions I had left on my list, which is fantastic. So I kind of wanted to, while we're talking about it, what do you think the interest in this case, the internet in general, like what role has it played? Do you think that they've been helpful? Has it been overwhelming? Has it been not helpful? How do you feel about it? Like I said, it's certainly one of the most infamous cases in true crime.
I would say helpful, but also harmful. Because this story has been circulated so much, and but each retelling is different because, rumors get spread or, somebody runs it through Chat GPT and they tell them this is what happened. And, I try to, and I have so many friends, including one of my old college professors. She will tag me anytime she sees somebody post about this, and I'm so thankful for her when she does that. But whenever I see them, I always make sure to comment on there and tell them who I am, and I tell them that unfortunately there's some inaccuracies, but I'm not upset about it. It's not their fault that there's not accurate information out there, but I would be happy to help them fix it. But of course, I have people arguing with me because they've followed the case their whole lives and they think they know everything about it. And I'm bringing out new information and they just can't understand why this is the first time they're hearing about it, which I do understand. But, I- and I've had people ask me why I am the first person to be public about it like so long after. And I really think the answer just comes down to that I have the most free time and I'm also, I'm not super comfortable speaking publicly, but I'm more comfortable than I would say most of my family is. We're pretty much a family of homebodies, like so but it has also been helpful. Answering people's questions really helps me think through things, and it also helps me figure out what I need to elaborate on whenever I'm telling the story myself, just to help people understand the case better. What I will say has been really helpful is websites like newspaperarchive.com, which is where I've found so many of the old newspapers from back then. And like I said, probably like 1,000 newspapers at this point. And everything, not everything, but having a lot of stuff digitized and having searchable databases has been really helpful.
Yeah, I always say, and I feel like it's like people might think it's a cop out, but it's all like a double-edged sword. It's good, it hurts. Some people are great, some people are not so great. And I mean, to the point you were making about being the first person that's been, really media facing in this case, I feel like that's kind of a newer thing. For decades, maybe people might write a book about what happened to their family, but in terms of, fighting for answers and broadcasting it, it feels very kind of new with the internet and with social media. Like, most cases don't have somebody like you researching and telling the story. Like, that's the norm. So, I mean, I think it's great that you're coming forward. And, I wish more families would do it. I understand why they don't 100%. But I think that there's so much value in that. Like, you're the only person that, a family member might let into their attic to look at a box of documents, for example. That's not going to happen for an everyday person. So that's why you have information that not everybody else has, because naturally, these families, your family has more information on this case than anybody.
Yeah, and I also think it's just, since my part of the Sodder family didn't have firsthand knowledge, and like I said, we didn't know that these documents existed for a long time. So I'm sure that members of the family just thought what could I do? Like George and Jenny were vocal for the rest of their lives and nothing happened. And I don't put any blame on any of my family members for not speaking out about it. Like, I don't blame them because this is a tough thing to do. Sometimes I'm like, man, it hits me all at once where I'm like, man, I am really looking into an 80-year-old cold case that was ruled an accident. Like that, it just blows my mind sometimes that I'm doing it. So I can't blame everybody else for not wanting to do it.
Oh, 100%. Well, and the bottom line is that nobody should have had, nobody should have to do this. In a perfect world, I think every family that's affected by true crime would just want the authorities to come in, solve it correctly so that they can heal and move on, right? Or, I understand with missing persons, it's not that simple, but you know what I mean? Like the ideal world isn't 80 years later having, a grandchild so far removed come do all this legwork. Nobody wants that. And to your point, those parents, I mean, they just did the most. And uh, yeah, I feel like it's just such a hard situation.
Yeah, it can be for sure, but I'm willing to stick it out because that's what they deserve, and sometimes I wish that they had access to the things that I have access to now. Like, I think if they had the technology that we have now, this case never would have went as long as it did, being, considered a closed case.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, of course, while you're here and everybody's listening, is there anything that you want to clear up? Like something that you always hear about the case that's just completely incorrect?
Well, I mean, the biggest and obvious one is that they didn't die in the fire. I don't even consider it a possibility, and it's not just because I'm a family member. It's just so inconceivable to think that the fire was hot enough to turn 5 children to ash, but still leave behind things like fabric and a stove and a part of a book and undamaged coins and no one heard screams, no one saw children at the window or smelled burning flesh. And this isn't just the family. Like, there were people there were witnesses that showed up once they heard the fire was happening, and nobody at the scene was able to say that they, saw any indication that the kids were in there. And I think the fact that the lights were still on and the doors were unlocked when Jenny woke up is the biggest indicator that they never made it back inside. From what I've been told, Maurice and Martha, who were the two oldest, were incredibly responsible, and they would not have gone to bed without doing what their mother had told them to do first. Also, I hear these a lot. The kids did not set the fire themselves and run away. George and Jenny did not sell them or send them out of the country for a better life. They weren't being abused. It does really break my heart to look through the comments and see people blaming George and Jenny. I think it really diminishes all the work they did. And this is coming from someone who never got to meet them. And I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for, my family members that did know them and did get to spend time with them, for them to have to read these awful things they're being said about them. I also don't, I know that a lot of people think the mafia was involved. I don't. I think that the mafia theory is the easiest for people to believe because it just kind of ties everything together neatly. Like, everything every part of the story, you can just be like, oh, well, yeah, the mafia would have done that. Yeah, the mafia would have done that. But, like I said earlier, the Janulos were incredibly well connected, and I don't think that they would have needed any outside influences to make people do what they wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I think all that is extremely fair. Extremely fair. And like I said, I think it's so powerful to hear from someone like you and to clear those things up. I mean, I don't think that you would have any motive to lie. You know what I mean? Like there's absolutely no motive for you to be deceptive in this case. You just want the truth. And I think that that's very apparent.
Yeah, and I have had people in Facebook comments with which, like, I don't care what people have to say, but I've had people be like, "Well, you're just doing this for the money," and I'm like, I don't know what money you think I'm making, but
What money?
What money?
It's I feel like that's so common in true crime, and I don't really know where people get that perception from, that people like you, people like me are paid for things like this, when in reality, it usually costs us money, and we're happy to spend that money. But of course, whenever you try to say like, "Hey, I'm not making any money," then they just, like, fight back harder, and I always feel like it's, like, just not worth it. Like, just, I love talking about ethics in true crime as a whole, but when it comes to comments like that, like, I usually just don't respond.
Oh, yeah. I usually don't. I mainly go through the comments just because of how long it has been with the incorrect story being circulated, and I always wanna be able to answer people's genuine questions, like, I know there are some people that genuinely care about the case, they just don't have access to the right information, so I always wanna be available for those people, um, but sometimes I do love to argue sometimes, and especially if people are gonna start saying uh slanderous things against George and Jenny, then I will fight back. But I agree. I have learned when to fight back and when not to fight back.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And I mean, honestly, I respect every family's choice to do whatever they want with their case in terms of speaking out. I just I don't know, maybe I've, like, lost my fight, for trying to specifically answer those questions for people. I don't know. It's so hard, I think, being a family in true crime because not only do you have to defend, like, every single aspect of the story, but then they make you defend yourself, and you're like, "Hey, man, like, I never wanted to be here. Do you think I, like, signed up for this to happen to my family? Like, I'm just trying to help." Like, I just wanna be like, "Can you give me a break?"
No, for real. I even had somebody, they were like, well, if you were a decent person, then you would turn all your information over to the FBI because it's their case anyways. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The FBI has never been involved in this case. They said that if the local officials would invite them, they would be glad to, but the local officials wouldn't. So I'm not sure what you think the FBI is going to do about an 80-year-old case that was closed.
Right, you're like, "I wish. I would love for somebody from the FBI to get involved. Like, how about they do this instead of me?" But you bring up a really good point. I wonder, I mean, I'm assuming that everything's closed, but is this case open, like, anywhere in any department?
No, nobody, there aren't even any departments that have any documents on it anymore because it was closed. So, like, everything has already been gotten rid of. The only people that have the documents are me and their granddaughter Jenny and anybody that she has sent the documents to. Um, but yeah, no, it's still closed. I don't exactly know how to go about it. I would like to get it reclassified. Not necessarily reopened, although it might be the same thing, just because I don't expect anybody to really investigate this because there's not really anything to investigate. Like, you can't interview anybody, you can't look through evidence, like, everything is gone. But I would like it to be reclassified just so it's not ruled as an accident anymore. Because a lot of people point to that. They're like, "Well, they investigated it. They ruled it an accident." And I'm like, "Okay, they said they investigated it, but they didn't." So, I think if we could get it, you know, reclassified, even just undetermined, like that would be cool with me.
Do you think that there's a piece of evidence out there that exists that could give us a definitive answer on this that would make everybody say, okay, this definitely was arson?
As far like if the kids grew up and did have families of their own, then obviously DNA would be the answer. And The number one question I get is, have you submitted DNA? Yes, I have submitted DNA. Other members of my family have as well. Since I'm so far down the line, it's less likely that I would be a viable match, but I do have, relatives that would have been closer to them that have submitted DNA. So, that's the obvious answer. But I don't know. Realistically, I think it's too late for this case to really be solved. So unless, someone has the original fire marshal case file, uh we don't know, like, the fire marshal doesn't have it anymore, and we're not entirely sure if it was gotten rid of or what. But, if somebody happens to have that, or, if the people that did it happen to write their confession down somewhere and it's just sitting in somebody's attic, um, other than that, I really don't know what, at this point, could be brought forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. And you just never know. Like, people go into their attics and find documents, or somebody's about to pass away and they're like, hey, I maybe didn't tell you about this. I feel like we see older cases like this solved all the time, or at least get more answers. So I don't think it's totally, out of range of possibility. I think that there's still, a lot that could be discovered. It's hard. Are people keeping secrets, and for what reason? What was retained? But yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that there's always hope. Which I do want to ask, best case scenario, what does justice look like for you at this point?
I think really all that matters to me now is getting the truth out there. And, it's important to me and to Sylvia's daughter, Jennie, that people know that Jordan and Jennie were so much more than what happened to them. They were kind, they were caring, they were strong-willed people that still cared about others despite what was done to them. And I think the fact that they stated that they would be willing to waive prosecution just to learn what happened to their kids speaks volumes about the type of people they were. They were not, I mean, I'm sure a small part of them was interested in getting the people that did this, but the bottom line was that they just wanted their kids back. That's all that, if that's all that happened, and even if the kids were dead and they could just learn that, like, that's all they wanted, was to know what happened to their kids. And I think, really what justice to me would just be making sure people know that, and making sure that they tried to get justice, but they basically weren't allowed it.
One crunchy bite of a Hershey's cookies and cream bar, and I'm taken right back to college move-in day. I was a little overwhelmed by the newness of it all. Boxes were everywhere, I needed a break from unpacking. But just as I was able to take a breath and open my Hershey's cookies and cream bar, my new roommate Rachel walked in. I offered her a piece, but she said no. Then after a beat, she said, actually, those are my favorite ones. We laughed. The ice was broken, and we've been friends ever since.
Hershey's. It's your happy place.
It's mushrooms with me, Maddie Matheson. You know what's better than thinking about dinner too hard? Not. Stop that and just choose mushrooms. 5 minutes. Done. Dinner's that easy and you feel like a genius. It's not magic, it's mushrooms. Stop stressing at mushroomcouncil.com.
I always like to end things on how we can help. How can my listeners right now help you? Is there a way to help you, or is it just sharing the story?
Just continue to share the story. And you can also join my Facebook group. It's just The Missing Sodder Children. That's where I'll be putting any updates I may have, and where I'll also share, any coverage that I would recommend listening to that would be accurate. I just ask that everyone bear with me while I try to figure it out since I'm, just one person. I would also really love to get a flower garden for them somewhere in Fayetteville. Their granddaughter, Jennie, still has the flowers from Jennie Sodder's original memorial garden, and she's agreed to donate them if I, can make it happen. I'm still trying to work on the logistics for that, but at some point I would probably have a petition for people to sign just to show that, it isn't just the family that thinks George and Jenny deserve something, that it's more than that.
I love that. And obviously, I will do anything I can to help, and I think my listeners will too.
Yeah, and wouldn't recommend going and buying anything on this just because like I've said, a lot of stuff isn't super accurate, so I would be cautious about that because I know that whenever people learn about a case, they want to, dig into it as much as they can. And I would just suggest that you be cautious about it. And, but like I said, my Facebook group, anything that I recommend that you listen to / read will be posted on there.
Yeah, I mean, who knows better than you? I think that that's perfect. Before we end, is there anything else that you wanted to say? Any questions? Anything else we can do to help? Absolutely anything.
Oh, there is one thing I forgot to mention as far as what I have uncovered. So you remember the older man picture that was sent to Jenny in 1967? So I was able to run that picture and the picture of the younger Lewis through Amazon's facial comparison software. And first, just to test it, I took pictures of my dad from around the same ages, and I made them black and white and ran them through, and it said that it was, because obviously it's not going to be 100%, it said that it was an 80% chance that it was the same person. Well, when I ran the older man picture and the picture of Lewis, it was a less than 1% chance that it was the same person. So, which was, a little rough, but I
Yeah.
kind of suspected that. It is very heartbreaking thinking of Jenny because, she fully believed it was him. She fully believed it. She had it framed. She put it on the billboard. So that's,
Yeah.
so tough to think about. But I think more than likely it was just sent by a detective that just wanted more money. And, unfortunately that happened. They did have some good private detectives, but, they also had some bad ones as well that just wanted, money from them. And I think that's what happened there. But in a way, it's a good thing because that picture just was another rabbit hole to go down because the writing on the back of the picture. There's so many theories on it, and there's nothing concrete, and that's just one less thing that I have to consider in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think eliminating a possibility, can be extremely helpful, even though it is, painful.
Yeah, and I will also say, George and Jenny thought that they saw a picture of Betty in a magazine in 1946, and there are pictures floating around that claim to be the picture, but the reality is that we do not know what the picture is. It's believed that we know that it was sent in 1946 because Marion, their oldest sister, she wrote a letter in January of 1947 to a school in New York asking about the girl in the picture. So it's believed that when they saw the picture, they ripped it out of the magazine and they only kept the picture. Because in the letter, she did reference a specific a specific magazine, which I was able to track down and buy. A magazine from 1946. Can you believe it? It's crazy.
Wow.
But and there's nothing in it that mentions the school that she wrote to, and there's not anything resembling Betty in that magazine. So it's believed that they didn't remember what the magazine was. But we do know it was seen sometime in 1946. But, just it, it really any picture that you see circulating, like I've seen pictures that claim to be the house. I've seen pictures that claim to be all, like there's one picture of 10 kids, but they're all super blonde, and that gets circulated as the Sodder kids, even though every single Sodder kid had very dark hair. So, I would just be cautious when seeing stuff like that, because like I keep saying, this story has been circulated for so long, and people just want to add whatever information they think will get people to read it. And so just be, super cautious in believing stuff like that, unless it like, I hate to say don't believe it unless it comes from me, but you get what I'm saying. Don't
Yeah.
believe things that, every random person says. Like I got tagged in one thing that every single thing in it was wrong, and they even quoted me as saying something that I, for one, never said, and two, never even talked to whoever this person was, and
Oh,
unfortunately,
I hate that.
yeah, well, and unfortunately, my family has had to deal with that for the past 80 years. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I wish more people knew that sometimes people just straight make things up, just absolutely make things up. And yeah, it's hard, right? Because how do you balance that? Because if you just say, like, come to me for all the information, people are like, but also, like, again, you have all the information. I don't think there's a person that exists with more information than you, other than maybe somebody who was, like, firsthand involved in the crime.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like I tend to not believe things that are only mentioned one time. Like, I read one article that said that the family dog went missing and was later found in town. And when I asked their granddaughter about it, she was like, I've literally never heard that before. So, like I said, people just like to add stuff just, because they think it'll, help push the story for whatever reason, which sucks. I don't understand that mindset, but unfortunately it does happen. And especially with this case, because of what all is on the internet, it's so hard to tell what is legit and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard to discern what's real and what's not, especially nowadays and with AI. And I could go on about that forever. But yeah, I think you make a lot of great points. And I think everybody should join your Facebook group.
Oh, and I'll also say, people bring this up to me a lot too. History's Greatest Mysteries on the History Channel did one about this. It's not great. Unfortunately, uh, Lawrence Fishburne really let me down on that one. Um, but
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I do appreciate that they focused on the kidnapping aspect more than it being an accident. I will give them credit for that. But I know it's the coverages that I know have the majority of the same information that I do, and they still misrepresent it. That's, if you are covering the case and you don't have access to the same documents I do, then I don't fault you for getting stuff wrong, because, it's easy to do because there's not accurate information available out there. But if you knowingly get stuff wrong despite having the correct information, that's when I get a little irked about it.
And I think that's fair. You know what I mean? I don't think any family in true crime is expecting perfection, right? We all make mistakes.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
told my sister's story wrong. I'm sure you've gotten a thing or two wrong. It happens all the time. But, I spend a lot of time dissecting really these the specials like on the History Channel, right? And I think people don't understand like there's a reason why it's not just a news broadcast. Like this is a production. They're telling a story. They're there to get viewers. They're not always there to tell it extremely accurately. And unfortunately, even in the History Channel, right? I think a lot of us lived through the dupe that was that like mermaids mockumentary or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not the same standard as it was when we were watching, the specials in school or whatever. It, these broadcasts, these, documentaries, these programs, whatever they are, they're there for entertainment, and that is their first priority. And then second, it's like getting things right. And I hate to say it, but I feel like that's the hard truth of it.
Yeah, and I've had so many people, suggest to me that, you should reach out to this show, or you should have a movie made about it. And I'm like, no, I would not ever do that. Like, for one, George and Jenny, I doubt George and Jenny would want that to happen. And two, I'm not gonna risk, getting the story wrong just because they want to sensationalize it.
Yeah. I mean, and when you do productions like that, they can make you an executive producer or give you, creative consultation or whatever, but ultimately it's never in your hands. And you just have to deal with what they put out. And oftentimes you're contractually obligated to stay silent on that. And I wish more people knew that too. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many reasons to not participate in those programs, and I totally get it.
Oh, yeah. Unless you can agree to not only give me full clearance over, approving everything before it's produced, but you can also agree that you are not going to make money off of it and that you'll either, donate the money to somebody I want it to be donated to or, something else, then I would not agree to it. And I know that no production company is going to be like, oh, yeah, we'll make this and not make money off of it. Sure.
I was gonna say, right? Like, let's be real, they wouldn't even agree to just like recouping their costs and breaking even. It's just not the way that it happens. Like, and I love that we're talking about like true crime in the entertainment industry. It's something I'm so passionate about, and I think it's just important for people to realize the reality of it, right? And they can make up their own minds about it, right? Do you think it's okay? Do you think it's not okay to profit off this type of stuff? Like, I think that's kind of for everyone to decide, but knowing how it actually happens behind the scenes is extremely crucial in them making that decision for themselves, right? Like, how is the bacon made? And 9 times out of 10 in this industry, it's pretty unethical. It's pretty horrible for the families involved. And it's not just like not getting paid, it's the trauma of it all. It's having to watch this final production that, could be vastly inaccurate.
Yes, and I read about that all the time. And, I like with the Dahmer show that Ryan Murphy did. People I didn't watch it because I knew the families of the victims were so upset by it. And I think if there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, right? Like if you and with anything, not just, like movies and TV shows with true crime books as well. Like if you do not have the family's interest at heart, then, you really shouldn't be doing it. Like you, I don't think that you should be able to profit off of somebody else's tragedy, if that makes sense.
You know, I think it's hard because I think money rules everything is like the unfortunate reality in our society. So I think when you remove that monetary incentive, it removes incentive altogether. And like if there was no money to be had in true crime, I fear that so many of these crucial stories would not be shared when they need to. I do think it would lead to less resolutions in these cases. But I also think that there has to be a balance. And I think that people need to be more honest. You know, if you create something specifically going against the will of a family, you know, then be bold enough to say it and tell your audience that and deal with the consequences of that. I think one of the most harmful things I see is when people know that they are purposely harming a family and disguise it as not that. I think it's fundamentally not honest. I think it's fundamentally, you know, against the victim at the center of the stories. I mean, that's certainly not what they would want. You know, and of course, like there's exceptions, right? You know, if a family is like directly involved and could be like the perpetrators of the case, that's one thing. But like something like this, you know, to your point, I think somebody could make an amazing production following you and what you're doing. And then, you know, donate the proceeds to, you know, the flower garden, right? To, you know, some type of beautiful memorial. I think that's one of the ways that we could really get like the best of all worlds in true crime.
Yeah, you know, that would be great. I don't know that I would want people following me around though. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I mean, fair. I mean, fair. It is like the worst thing ever. But you know, I think what I see in you right now is like what I saw in myself, in that, like, I had to have a million people tell me, like, hey, like, you're a part of this too, and what you're doing matters, and people care about what you're doing. That's something I still struggle with today. Like, when people are like, no, like, we care about you. And I'm like, me? Like, I'm not the missing kid in this story, right? But people, you know, they do care about you and they care about the journey that you go on. And like I said, it's taken me years and I still struggle with it. But I do feel like that's part of the story too. You know, this like generational curse, for lack of a better word, that families like you and I have to deal with when these cases just go, you know, unsolved or unresolved or without answers for so long. So in short, you know, give yourself credit. I would watch a documentary following you around, but also you have the right to say no, thank you.
Listen, they just be seeing me sitting with my cats the whole time. That's
Cats in a big stack of papers.
Yes, oh my goodness, a big stack of papers. My binder is so thick, and I haven't even added anything more to it, even though I need to. I just, you know, I kinda did this really quickly but I, you know, I will say that, you know, you have been a huge inspiration for me. Because, you know, I listened to your podcast for a long time before I decided to do this. And, you know, when I finally listened to the coverage that you did on the case, that's when I was like, you know what? I should reach out to her, but I should also start doing it myself. I think that you know, because I've played around with the idea for years, but I just never was really ready. And then I finally was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try. And you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I've, you know, learned to trust the universe with this, and I know that if something is meant to happen, then it will, and if it's not, then okay.
Well, thank you. That really does mean a lot to me. Like, always makes me tear up when people say that. I don't know. I love family member led true crime. I think that that is like the most raw and honest. You know, because I think we can easily come in here and say, like, we're family. So, yeah, of course we're biased. But I also have the best intentions with figuring out the answers in this case. And especially in your case, like, you have absolutely nothing to hide. You know, of course, you're family, right? But you're so far removed with the time of it all. It's like, you know, you just want the answers. And I think when it's such a raw and pure mission like that, it's something that I love to hear about. And I think it's something that people also love to cheer on. So, in short, like, you know, I think you're amazing. And, you know, I would support and love to help you do anything you want to do with this case. And I genuinely think people are going to be excited to hear from you and they're going to want to hear from you more. Like, I would be so fascinated to hear an entire series of you telling this story with all the information that you found.
I've toyed around with it a little bit. Maybe one day, I would like to do. I certainly would have plenty to talk about. I would definitely need to learn how to separate everything, just because there is so much to talk about, and I can ramble for hours about one specific thing. But maybe I might do it one day. I think it would. I definitely think people would love to hear it. Um, and I would whatever advice you would have for me for that, I would love to hear it too.
I mean, that's something I could talk about all day, and we can. We can. Um, but yeah, I think I don't know. I love what you're doing, and I want to support in any way I can. And please never hesitate to reach out. And I hope that this interview, will just draw more people to your group and to you and to follow you. You know what I mean? More so than, sharing my episodes or whatever. I'd rather them go to you.
So I also have an email, since I am a one-person investigative team. My tip email is the number 5 and then SodderKids@gmail.com. So the number 5, SODDERKIDS@gmail.com. And that's for if you have any tips, or I would really love to see, since the billboard was up for decades, if anybody happens to have any pictures. I would love to see pictures that people have taken, or if you just have any questions. Like, that's mainly the emails I've gotten so far, is just people asking more questions, and as long as I have the time, I'm more than willing to answer them.
I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to do this with me. I know that it's not easy, it's not fun, especially this time of year, but I do appreciate it.
No, of course. I was so excited to be able to do this. I've been hoping that I could get on your podcast for a while, because I knew that one, I knew you'd come up with really good questions, and you did. And talking to you is always fun. So
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Anytime, anytime.